sports.
Hey gang, Roden here. Welcome on back to the Retrocade and welcome to another episode of Sports Saturday, where we hit the Wayback Machine and explore a classic sports game from the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th generation. A quick apology for this game being, or for this week's edition being up a little bit later than I had planned. I had a little bit of technical difficulties when I was starting to record this yesterday that I didn't realize until I started doing the processing on it to get it online, so I had to go back and do it again just for good measure. But for this week, we are going to go back to 2006, and we are going to play EA Sports Fight Night Round 3 for good reason. We're going to revisit one of the greatest fights of the early part of the 20th century, or 21st century, I should say. And it may be a fight that, unless you're a really big-time boxing fan, you may not be that familiar with. We are going to recreate the first fight between the two men you see on the title screen, Arturo Thunder Gatti on the left and Irish Micky Ward on the right. Now, their three fights occurred starting May 18th, 2002. They fought for the second time 6 months later in November, and then fought for the final time 6 months after that in May of 2003. And they are three fights that, if you are looking for a version of boxing that is as close to what Sylvester Stallone created when he built the Rocky universe, the Gatti Ward trilogy are it. And I'm not being hyperbolic in saying so. So what we're going to do over the course of the next half hour is going to see just how well we can do in trying to recreate their first fight. And their first fight was by far the best of the trilogy. And as we go through, I want to kind of give you a bit of explanation as to why it is that these two guys are so revered among boxing enthusiasts. But we'll deal with that as we go along. I also want to obviously highlight the game, which again came out in 2006 and came out on multiple consoles. It came out on the Xbox 360, the PSP, the PS2, and then it was released on the PS3 about a week later in early March of 2006. Now, I'm playing on the PS2 version of it. We are playing on PCSX2, which again is a free emulator for people who are looking to have a platform by which to play it and don't have a PS2 anymore. And among the series, of which there are five Fight Night games created by EA Chicago in the early 2000s, Fight Night Round 3 is definitely on the higher end of the bunch. You can make the argument that Fight Night Round 4 is the best in terms of mechanics and presentation. But by the time Fight Night Round 3 came along, EA really had it down in terms of building the mechanics and giving a presentation that is in line with what fans of the sweet science want in a video game. Especially by comparison to what we had had for a long time, which was things like, obviously the original Punch-Out and Mike Tyson's Punch-Out and Ring King in the 80s, which are all great games. I mean, I absolutely love those games. But EA was still at that point in the early 2000s that they were really on the top of their game of giving the best overall package when it came to their sports titles. And we were starting to see that start to ebb off really with Madden a couple of years later, but really they were still in their stride as they were doing these games. So I'm going to pause it right as Arturo Gatti's about to hit me with a scorching right hand, just to give you a bit of an idea of how this game works. So you have your... Whoop. Let me get back here and pull in my controller here. So each config allows you to do different means of being able to control each fighter. I like the controls that allow me to use the buttons to punch as opposed to using one of the two joysticks, only because it gives me a little bit more control And by switching it up and letting you have the buttons do the work, you can use the right stick to work as a block button. And that is critical in a game like this because you don't want to be able to take damage as you're trying to throw on your own. Now, one of the novel things that they put in this game is that they put in essentially what is a parry function, which I just did right there. And that if you can block the right punch as it's coming in, it gives you essentially a free counter-punch opportunity against your opponent. Now, you have your basic punches, you have your jab, you have your cross, you have your hook, you have your opposing hook, and you have your uppercut. And if you use the L1 button, you can go downstairs to the body, which for a fighter like Micky Ward is critical. Because his best punch throughout his entire career was a left hook that he threw to the body.
Gatti's going to have to come up with an answer for that hook to his head.
Now you can also, utilizing the L2 button, you can switch positions so you can alternate between being a conventional right-handed fighter and being a southpaw fighter. Now, Micky Ward and Arturo Gatti were both right-handed fighters and they never traded off.
There's some visible swelling around his right eye. Smooth 1-2
and because this game had the backing of ESPN, they were able to bring in Joe Tessitore to do the play-by-play, and he's still one of the better play-by-play guys in the fight game. Honestly, I preferred him than I did to Jim Lampley by the end of his run with HBO.
Tried to jab upstairs.
Now, why the fights between Gatti and Ward are so memorable? Like I said, they're the closest thing you will see to an actual Rocky fight in real life. The 3 fights that they had were only 10 rounds each, which is a lot. But in boxing, championship fights nowadays are they're 12 rounds long. At one point, back in the 70s and the early 80s, they were still 15 rounds long. Now, one thing that is a bit of a peeve for me about this game is that they changed the recuperative dynamics from round 2. And round 2 was a lot easier to patch your fighter up and then send them back out into action. It was easier to stay on point and be able to make sure that any damage got addressed as soon as possible. Whereas in this one, it is more of a, you've got to be able to stick with how the rotation of that R stick is moving. And you'll know you're doing well because the numbers will turn from red to green. But it's hard to maintain a consistent rhythm on it. And you have to do the same thing with cuts. So then, as the fight goes along, if your boxer takes more damage, you've got to pick your battles as best you can to either reduce the swelling or deal with a cut. Because if the cuts get too bad, the referee will stop the fight or the corner will throw in the towel.
Using the jab effectively, always a great way to win rounds. Thunder comes forward and lands a solid combo.
Now, these two guys were not the greatest fighters in the world, and they would be the first to admit it. In the course of his career, Irish Micky Ward lost 13 times. And the final 2 losses came against Gatti in the second and third fight in their trilogy. He never won a world title, although he did fight for one. But he is very much in the, for lack of a better term, the Rocky Balboa mold of being a fighter. He wasn't the flashiest guy. He wasn't the most popular guy. He didn't win he won some fights pretty dramatically, but he wasn't a marquee name. But he was a guy that if you stepped in the ring against him, you were going to have a bit of a tough night because he could take a punch, he could get knocked down, he wasn't afraid to get cut, he wasn't afraid to go toe-to-toe. And Arturo Gatti
He's looking to take the initiative with that
was
jab.
a bit different in that he was a bit slicker. He was more polished. He was a better all-around boxer than Micky Ward, who was much more meat and potatoes as a fighter.
Left hook crashes into his opponent's head.
But Gatti is what they refer to as a boxer-puncher. He could be slick when he wanted to, but if you made him go toe-to-toe, he had no problem standing there and just trading with you all night long.
You really need to go after him with a balanced attack. Head, body,
And he was a guy who provided a lot of action like Ward did. So when they talked about putting these two guys in a ring together and to see what would happen, a lot of people knew that it was probably going to be a really, really cracking fight. What nobody had any idea about was that it was going to become a 10-round absolute war. And it wasn't fought in a big location. Their first fight took place at the Mohegan Sun Casino in Connecticut. It wasn't a major card. But everybody who was there that night, and you can watch the fights on YouTube now, they've been there for a long time. All you got to do is watch the first about 4 or 5 rounds, and you realize very, very quickly that these two guys are going to hit each other with everything they got before the fight is over. And that's exactly what they did. The most telling part for me was in the first fight, around the 5th round, Micky Ward had Gatti up against the ropes, and he unleashed a 5-punch combination of straight hooks that if Gatti's neck was not as strong as it was, his head would have spun like a basketball. And 98% of the time, you hit a guy with a combination like that, and it puts them down. And not only did Gatti not go down, he kept fighting right to the end of the round, while everybody, including the commentators, were going berserk.
Oh, that right eye is looking freaking awful. Take that swelling down. Suck in a deep breath, son. What were you doing out there? All right, we're okay.
And then the round that everybody talks about out of the entire trilogy is round 9 of the first fight, because Ward finally knocks Gatti down with his trademark left hook to the body. Gatti gets up, Ward goes after him, just about punches himself out into exhaustion. Gatti looks like he's got the upper hand. Ward comes back towards the end of the round. Looks like he may end up stopping the fight. And both guys make it out of the round still on their feet. And it's because he knocked him down that Ward was able to win the first fight by a majority decision, which means 2 of the 3 judges voted in favor of him, and the 3rd judge voted it a draw, which it easily could have been. And then in the second fight, which happened again 6 months later in Atlantic City, New Jersey, Gatti was able to take it to Ward and knock him down with a punch that legitimately ruptured Ward's eardrum. And to his credit, Micky Ward not only got up, but he fought the rest of the fight with no balance at all. Now think about that. You are in a ring with a guy who is trying to hit you with every punch he can. You have no balance. The ring is spinning. And you've got to go, I think the knockdown happened in the 3rd round, so he had to fight for another 20 minutes that way. Which I don't know how a human being can do that. I genuinely don't. I mean, I've been into boxing for a long time, and nobody ever popped my eardrum, but I've had times where, like, I just woke up one day and my balance was off because something was up with my ear. And just, like, getting to the kitchen to eat breakfast was bad enough. Try doing that
He makes solid contact with those two punches.
in the middle of a boxing ring.
Mickey Ward's able to do some business with the jab.
And then in the third fight, the tables turned a little bit because Gatti, around, again, the same time, around the early rounds,
Nice clean combination.
broke his right hand, which was his power hand,
He's looking to take it to him with an effective
against
counter.
Ward's hip. So for the rest of the night, he had to fight Micky Ward
Beautifully executed
pretty much with
combination.
one hand. And he did. And he won the fight, again, by unanimous decision, like he did in the second fight.
Throwing the jab, being patient, looking to create openings. He launches two strong shots. Mickey Ward's being patient, working
One of the
behind
things that
jab
I
and
think they
looking
improved
for
on dramatically over round 2 was EA Chicago, I think, got the right mix of being able to take a punch
showing. No
and not
question who
burning
won that
yourself
last
out too
round.
quickly.
Look
That was
again
something
at the
that I
tenacity from Ward.
was a bit unhappy about in playing round 2, which we did back in episode 12 of this series.
Now let's concentrate on taking
And
this
here we are at
next
episode
round.
24.
Get it
So
together.
the symmetry
Put
of
it around
that
your
I
ass
find
growing. You
a
keep
bit
that in your
amusing,
pocket,
even though it
It
wasn't
won't matter
intentional.
what your lead is, 'cause the ref is gonna stop this thing. Keep your guard up.
But again, the reviews of this game were predominantly high. For the PS2, Metacritic ranked it 84 out of 100. On the PS3, it was 83 out of 100. Same on the Xbox, and the Xbox 360 actually was the highest ranked at 86 out of 100. The only one that really got a subpar score was the PSP version, which I'm not
Let's
surprised,
get the cold compress on the bruised left arm. We gotta fix that thing.
only because
Some
it,
air.
the PSP did have its limitations that the PS2 and the
He's in
PS3
trouble
didn't.
now. His eye is bleeding bad, but we ain't winning this thing until the ref calls the fight. Keep at it, kid. Use that target.
But Game Informer gave it a 9 out of 10 for both the PS2 and the PS3 and the Xbox versions as well. Edge Magazine gave it on all four an 8 out of 10. GameSpot gave it an 8 plus out of 10. So did IGN, GameZone, and a lot of the other popular publications at the time. So
with a straight shot.
EA was riding a definite wave of success,
Crisp, straight punch.
even with a niche title like this one. Because again, as I've talked about in other with other titles when we do like WTF Wednesday, not everybody's going to run out and drop
That's the kind of jab
50,
shot
60
you wanna
bucks
see
on a
from
boxing game.
Ward.
You got to be
Yeah,
somebody
he
like
doesn't
me
want
who
the ref
really
stepping
loves
in
the
like
sport.
this. He wants to finish things on his own.
We're the
referee
clientele
is
that you are
warned that he's
catering
going
to.
Stop the fight. I do the same thing if we don't start seeing some defense from Gatti. He throws a loose and easy jab, looking confident in there.
But one of the big issues I had with round 2 was that it was really, really easy to punch yourself out.
Straight body blow.
And when I say that, it's that you are trying to throw punches
Gatti's gotta be having
and it
trouble
just
seeing how his
takes
left
so
eye
much
is
out of your
nearly
stamina
closed.
that by the midpoint in the fight,
Listen, I agree completely with the ref.
you
Threats
really
to stop
can't
this
get
fight.
into
He can't
exchanges
start
and you
protecting
can't be able
himself.
to throw
He
the
needs to
punches that
defend
you
himself
want
or mount some kind
and
of
do the
offense.
damage that you want.
He's doing a good job of drawing him in and then countering. He's
Because you don't have the
really
energy to
displaying
do
his
it.
Counter-punching skills.
But also, it doesn't take much for your overall health to start whittling away.
Mickey Ward's taking it to him with his jab.
Especially in a fight like this where both guys are going to give and take the entire
Leaves himself
time.
open for that jab combination by Irish. Good straight shot. Thunder's grimacing after that hook to his midsection. If he can keep the jab going, he can look to control this bout.
And all I'm trying to do here is being able to set up where I can throw that left hook downstairs and chop down as much health as you can get.
He's cleaning up, countering, and making him look silly.
Ooh, got caught with a good uppercut there.
You can't just walk in and throw, because if you do, he's gonna make you pay.
Now, if the name Micky Ward sounds familiar to you and you're not a boxing fan, it may be because a couple of years after this trilogy concluded and Micky had retired, they made a movie about his life leading up to these fights with Gatti called The Fighter. And it was one that was very well received. It starred Mark Wahlberg as Micky Ward, and Christian Bale was his brother slash trainer, Dickie Eklund. And Bale won an Academy Award, and deservedly so, for his portrayal of Dickie Eklund. The Fighter came out in 2010.
Relax and get your wind back. What do I have to do to get it through your thick skull?
And
Protect
Ward,
your eye. Get your gloves on.
for the course of his
Look for his
career,
right when it comes in.
fought 51 times. He won 38, lost 13, and had 27 wins by knockout. Arturo Gatti fought 49 times, was 40-9 with 31 knockouts. And one of the tragedies about this story is that, unfortunately, Arturo Gatti died in July 2009 under what is still considered to be suspicious circumstances in Brazil.
His eye's pretty bad now, and I don't think his corner team knows what they're doing. If you put him down, I
And
get
it
this
was a
fight called.
big
We
deal
win.
for the next 18 to 24 months as people are trying to figure out what happened to him. But because these two guys fought the way they did for those 18 months between 2002 and 2003, they are revered, especially considering they didn't fight for a title. At no point were either guy a champion.
Gatti waited for his opponent to come in and timed it beautifully. What
But
a
they
punch.
fought like they had the undisputed welterweight championship of the world on
That
the
punch
line,
makes his head spin.
which is not something you're used to seeing at
He
that
takes a
level.
straight shot there.
Oh, and now I've really got him cut. So I think I've broken his nose, and I've definitely got him cut over the right eye. Meanwhile, he's bloodied my nose. And this is not too indifferent to how
Comes with a hook.
the actual fights
Right
went.
to the
I mean,
body.
both
He really
guys,
needs to cover up better, or he may end up with a cracked rib.
even though they fought 10 rounds each fight, that's 30 rounds total. And the amount of punishment both guys took, giving and receiving, is beyond the pale.
Ward with a nice right hand left hook combination.
And I haven't seen many interviews with Micky Ward in the years since he retired. They did a great documentary series, HBO did, about a lot of their fights that they covered before they stopped showing boxing on their network a couple of years ago. And the last one they did of the series, which is called Legendary Nights, was all about the Gatti Ward trilogy.
Gatti's just belted.
And if you don't necessarily want to watch the fights, if you're not a boxing fan or whatever, and you want to know more about it, I highly encourage you to go look that one up on YouTube. It's Legendary Nights, The Tale of Gatti Ward. They obviously show clips from all three fights in it, but it's much more of a conventional documentary than anything else. But you get the chance to listen to Micky Ward talk about the fight in his own words.
Gatti's
They have footage of Gatti, but unfortunately the doc was made after he passed away.
pressed the issue with a nice counter. Thunder's taking that shot well. We're coming up on the end of the round. Arturo
Oh,
Gatti
good two-punch
proved
combination to
dominance
punctuate the
with
round
that
for
thoroughly one-sided
Ward.
round. Gatti took the lead. As you can see here, he was able to control the last round.
Now, if there was a criticism about this version of Fight Night, Maxim Magazine, they said that the mini games and the stuff that goes into career mode detracted from the overall action of the game, and they were a bit boring. And again, it is one where if you're trying to make a boxing game interesting and you're trying to get people to play things like a career mode, you're going to take a certain amount of risk in putting content in there that wants to keep people playing. They weren't bad. I mean, it was a lot of, essentially, it was the Rocky training montage split out over a bunch of mini games. So you would do things like, you would do fighting drills, you would do, work the heavy bag, you would work sparring, you would do things like that.
And we're off with round number 6.
They also pointed out that the product placement in this game is a bit obscene, but that also speaks to the nature of the sport, in which everything in boxing is about marketing and product placement and sponsorship and all of that stuff. I mean, that's nothing new.
Micky Ward's landed great punches to the body. They really add up over the
One of the reasons why boxing is still a viable sport to a certain degree is because it doesn't cost a ton of money to put on television, and you're able to have a whole bunch of sponsorships laid out all over the ring. So it is a bit of a moneymaker in and of itself, provided you don't give the crowds boring fights. And if you ask anybody who is familiar with the Gatti Ward trilogy, what they will tell you is that boring, they were not.
Arturo Gatti's really taking a lot of punishment. He's been absorbing jabs all day, and if he doesn't figure out a way to get around them soon, this fight could be lost.
Oh, and I'm almost to a point where I can put him down. Let's see if I can get him to go.
His great balance allows him to come back with a hard hook. Incredible defensive work leaves his opponent looking.
Oop, got him with the hook. And got him with another hook, and down he goes. Oh, and he's stuck up against the ropes. I think the game flopped him over because he was up against the ropes.
One, two, three.
One other point of interest is that Fight Night Round 3 is the only game from the series that managed to make it into the book 1001 video games you must play before you die.
He drives into him with a solid body blow.
It doesn't say in my research that I could find of where it's ranked in that. To be honest, I don't have that book, so I'm not sure exactly how it's broken down. But that it made it into it is a bit of high praise for a series which, again, has a limited niche to it. And one of the things that they worried about, as far as critics went, is the series was progressing, was that Fight Night Round 4 was purely going to be a fresh coat of paint on what was a really good mechanical system, but one that had already been around for a few years. And again,
from what you're seeing here, let's see
round 4 is still arguably the best one of the series, along with round 3. They really gave the full presentation and package that I think a series like this deserved. But then after that, EA decided that it really wasn't a viable franchise anymore. We got one more game, which was Fight Night Champion, but I'm really not a big fan of that one, just because I didn't like the story mode, I didn't like the mechanics of it. I think they went too far afield from what made this series good at this point in its lifespan. And then EA decided to just drop the series outright, and we haven't had a boxing game from them since. In fact, the only boxing games that I know of that have come out in the last couple of years was they did one to support the Creed movie franchise. But EA didn't make those games, and I don't believe they have been well received by critics or by gamers. So we're at round 7, and as expected, it's been back and forth. I mean, I've taken quite a bit of damage. Gotti's taken a lot of damage.
His opponent's left eye is looking worse, all from the accurate punching.
And that cut might be enough to get this fight stopped.
He knows exactly what he's doing. Another sharp hook to the midsection. He needs to protect himself better, or he's going to get caught with counter hooks all day.
I like the way the camera's placed in this.
He's in real trouble now.
If anything, I might have liked it to be, or I might have liked it to be a little bit more consistent and not quite as shaky, but again, that's a small nit to pick. Oh, right back with a left hook to the body, and down goes Gatti again.
I don't think he's going to get up too quickly from that barrage. Let's have another look at that knockdown, brought to you by Burger King.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Can he make it up? He is up at 8.
Arturo Gatti's going to have to gather himself if he wants to get back into the fight after that knockdown.
Oh, and now Ward is cut. So I'm cut under the eye, whereas opposed to Gatti being cut over the eye. Now, being cut is obviously very common in boxing. Because the way the gloves are designed, it's easy to be able to tear a piece of skin open after it's been hit about a couple of dozen times. But getting cut under the eye is not as bad as getting cut over the eye. Because over the eye, depending on how your physiology is and how the bone structure around your eye is, blood can run into your eye and make it so you can't see, and that's even compounded even more so by swelling. Whereas if you get cut under the eye, you're not hampered quite that badly, but if the cut gets bad enough, the referee can be compelled to stop the fight anyway.
He's ready to go. One more solid combination, and he's going to be on his back with his eyes staring at the ceiling. Powerful right uppercut, left hook combination for Ward. Tremendous, a left uppercut connection.
Can I put him down before the end of the round? Nope. Gatti got out of the round. I had him hurt, but could not close the deal.
That wasn't your best round. You need to cover up. Your right eye is taking way too much damage, and you're letting your buddy run away with this fight. Stay on the outside, make him miss, and start throwing.
So in 1001 games to play before you die, the Sony PS2 had 53 games. Which was the most out of any console system, well more than the Nintendo Entertainment System, which only had 11.
Nice work out there. Keep your head in the fight, and we're gonna beat this loser. That
Which I find
shows
fascinating,
swell
considering
up
how many more
real
games there
bad.
were for the
We're
NES
good right now.
than there were
Now
for
I
the
just want
PS2.
you to go after his eye. Use it for target practice. The sooner we close it for him, the sooner we'll be leaving this ring with a W.
See if I can get that swelling under 10% here. There we go.
Let's get started with round number 8. His left eye is incredibly swollen. You hate to say it, but he could be on the verge of having permanent damage. That one catches him squarely.
So knock Gatti down twice.
Gatti's obviously leaving himself open to get popped.
I'm curious how many more times he can get knocked down before this fight ends.
Arturo Gatti's not going to be in the fight much longer if he keeps taking shots like that. The damage has really accumulated. He's about ready to collapse on his feet. One more solid combination and he's going to fall.
Oh, good combination, and down he goes again. And he went down face first, which usually means fight over. One thing I always did like about it, even though they are a bit silly the way that they are designed, but the knockdown mechanics are straight out of a Rocky Balboa movie. And I'm not harping on those movies at all. I mean, I'm an American kid who grew up in the early 70s and 80s. Everybody I knew loved those movies, including me. Oh, and he's not even gonna get up.
9, 10, it's over.
Yeah, Gatti didn't even try to get up. But this fight is done. So, I score the knockout over Arturo Thunder Gatti, which did not happen in the actual trilogy, but I'm not going to argue about it. And it looks like I was comfortably ahead on all scorecards, 77-72 and then 76-73. So if it went to a decision, I would have won pretty easily. And that, everybody, is Fight Night Round 3 for the PS2. Again, if it's a game that, if you like boxing, it's definitely one that I would recommend to check out if you've never played it before. But also, because it's the only title in the series that featured Gatti and Ward, I wanted to be able to recreate this to commemorate the anniversary of that first of their 3 epic fights with each other, which again took place on May 18th, 2002. And even now, 21 years later, they're still considered 3 of the greatest fights of all time. And we may well, even though we've got another, nearest makes no difference, 80 years of this century to go, I wouldn't be surprised if when we get to the year 2100, if they are still considered to be the greatest fights of this century. I hate to put it this way, I'll be long gone, so somebody else will make that determination, but, we'll see how it goes. So, if you've enjoyed this, and I hope you have, easiest way to show it is to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you are new, ring the bell to be notified of the latest content. Also, don't forget, we will have Suckerpunch Sunday coming up tomorrow, where we play a classic fighting or fighting platform-based game from the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th generation. Last week, we played Black Hole Assault for the Sega CD system, which was a bit of fun. And I'm still trying to figure out which one I will have ready to record later tonight. So, and again, apologies for getting this out later than it is. Technical difficulties and whatnot beyond my control, but as it is, we made sure we could get it out today anyway. Also, you can help spread the word about our channel by going to our Instagram page, which is Ronan's Retrocade, and spread the word so we can get to our goal of 100 subscribers as soon as we can. That way we can unlock YouTube's customization algorithm and make this channel bigger and better. Thank you to everybody who has subscribed so far. I have seen the numbers go up. It's, again, I cannot be any more grateful than I am about it, that you're taking an interest in this pokey little channel of mine, and it gives me a lot of incentive to keep creating content as best as I can, as soon as we can. To that end, I am hoping to get my next playthrough underway early next week. I have a title picked out. I'm not going to spoil it yet, but I do need to get some more recording done between tomorrow and Monday so I can start posting those as well. And if there is a game you would like to see us feature from the Nintendo Entertainment System, the Super Nintendo, Sega Master System, Sega Genesis, or Mega Drive, SNK, Neo-Geo, Nintendo 64, PlayStation 1, or PlayStation 2, Leave it in the comments below or drop me a line on Instagram. It can be any game you want. As always, my name is Ronan. It's been great to spend this Sports Saturday with you. Be safe, be well, happy gaming, and we will see you tomorrow for Suckerpunch Sunday. Bye.